Alright lads, it's the Meta Goblin here, and today we're covering glyphs. So we're going to go through all the glyphs which are viable, when they're viable in certain situations, and which glyphs are complete turd and you shouldn't even be thinking about. So let's quickly go through the list and I'll tell you which ones are viable and which ones are not. This Anti-Magic Shell isn't, that version is not. Blood Boil, viable for Unholy. Dark Sim, very viable. Death Grip is very viable. Enduring Infection, I think it is viable. Icy Runes is viable. Icy Touch is very viable. That isn't. Regenerative Magic is very viable. Runic Power is very viable. Shifting Presences is viable. Swift Death is very viable against a Shaman. Silence is quite viable in certain comps. Absorb Magic is more of a PvE thing. Empowerment's good for kind of like double DPS 2s. Ice Reaper is very viable for survivability, for duels, and that's pretty much it for all of these specs. Its Pillar of Frost isn't very useful either. So let's talk through the glyphs and explain in which situation they become viable and why they are viable. Now, Blood Boil is not a frost glyph. This is primarily a unholy glyph. It's viable in every situation, in arena, rated background. I always pretty much have it just so I can get my dots spread out a little easier. Simple as that. Dark Sim is extremely viable, but obviously if you can't steal crowd control with it, then it isn't viable. So if you're against like a Warlock or like a Mage, where they cast their crowd control and you can see that when they're casting their crowd control, and you can just steal it, that's when Dark Sim becomes viable. If you don't do that, say you're against KFC, if you're against a Hunter and the Warrior, you're not going to steal any crowd control from them. You might steal it from the healer, but if it's a Paladin, probably no chance. So yeah, don't go for it if you can't steal crowd control. Death Grip, this is extremely viable in rated battlegrounds for both specs. By the way, Dark Sim's obviously viable for both specs. This Death Grip glyph is extremely useful in like the opening fight. It can really put some pressure on an enemy player. Enduring Infection, this is primarily an unholy glyph if you're going for the Necro Blight rotation. However, if you're playing with a Warlock in Shadowcleave, it's not worth picking because healers don't dispel Warlock dots ever because they get silenced. So, but this if you're playing any other comp, I think it's extremely strong because your dots will get dispelled, and when your dots get dispelled, it's quite punishing. So this is going to help you out a lot, and it's only a 15% damage reduction, which isn't actually that bad at all. So what else we have? Icy Runes. This is it's more of a dueling thing. It's not really it's alright, but I just wouldn't go for it because there's so many other useful glyphs. I think it's only exclusive for perhaps if you're playing with a comp without things to purge, without things to So I think it's more of a double DPS talent glyph to go for when you're against another double DPS comp, and perhaps they're not spellcasters. So Icy Touch is always viable. I pretty much never deselect this. I can always purge something in freeze. Power Ward, Life Bloom, all that kind of stuff, and it puts in a massive amount of pressure. It's very viable for both specs. You will be using Icy Touch a lot in both specs. So yeah. Regenerative Magic is extremely useful, especially when you know you're going to take a lot of damage. But the thing is, don't opt for this glyph if you're not against a magical DPS. So if you're against KFC or Fug Cleave, something like that, then it's not really worth going for because you're not going to negate a lot of damage. Runic Power. This is a glyph I barely deselect at all. I would argue it's a mandatory glyph. It's just a bit of extra runic power. DK lack maneuverability overall, but the thing is, DK is like half melee, half range class. So and when we're getting kited, this definitely helps us generate runic power and get a lot of DPS in that like small space of time that we can stay in melee range. So it's extremely useful for basically for our damage. Shifting Presences is I don't know. It's more of a thing. If you're going to get trained, if you're playing like what's it called? Smoke Bomb Cleave. You might need to switch in between Blood and the Holy or Frost quite often, so it's that kind of thing. But to be honest, what I do is I dump a runic power and then switch anyway. So Anyway, Glyphs of Strangulate is extremely useful if you're going for Strangulate. Obviously you only go for Strangulate in a heavy stun comp, so if you're playing with a warrior, if you're playing for a rogue, I would recommend going for Strangulate instead and opting for this Glyph. The only problem is that sometimes you wait too long to use Strangulate, but that extra 2 seconds is actually pretty useful. It means it's a 7-second silence. It's as long as a polymorph and stuff like that is very useful. Swift Death. This is very useful against Shaman, especially if you're going to train a Shaman. If it's an Ellie or a Resto, if you know you're going to train a Shaman all game, what you basically do is you make a mouse over macro for Soul Reaper, and you pop like whack-a-mole the totems with Soul Reaper, and what it does, it will give you the 30% speed increase, and it will also give you the haste increase as well, which is really nice. Others, that's more of a PvE glyph. Empowerment's kind of a thing that you play for when you're playing double DPS for extra survivability. IC Reaper is definitely a great dueling glyph. You should definitely go for that, because you really want to spam your death siphons and duels, and this is going to help you retain, death runes. And that's pretty much it. Other than what is it? This tranquil grip. What is it? Resilient grip. Yeah, resilient grip. You never want to choose out of that. And I think these are mostly just cosmetics. So anyway, that's pretty much the end of the video. There's nothing else to talk about for glyphs. My name is the Meta Goblin, and until my next video, ciao.